Some betrayals don't happen in dark alleys. They happen under bright hospital lights, surrounded by family who choose silence over truth. What begins as a moment meant for unity turns into public humiliation, exposed lies, and a slap that echoes far beyond the skin. This is a story about survival disguised as silence, about memory quietly turning into a weapon, and about a marriage built on secrets that were never meant to stay buried. When loyalty bends, when family protects the wrong people, and when love becomes a shield for deception, the truth always finds its moment. Here, revenge doesn't come with raised fists or screaming matches. It arrives through records that don't lie, messages that never disappear, and timing so perfect it leaves no room for denial. If you believe the most powerful revenge is revelation, and that silence can be louder than violence, you're in the right place. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and false hope, the kind that makes families whisper instead of speak. What should have been a moment of quiet unity turned sharp the second raised voices cut through the hallway. Doctors paused, nurses stared, strangers slowed their steps. A stepbrother's face twisted with a fury that had been waiting years for permission to surface, fueled by entitlement that had always been protected and resentment that had never been questioned. Words came fast and loud, accusations layered with old grudges no one ever admitted existed. Fingers jabbed the air, voices echoed off white walls, and the performance felt rehearsed, as if this rage had been stored for a public stage. Then the slap landed, hard, sudden, meant to put someone back in a place that family had silently assigned long ago. The sound echoed louder than the machines beeping behind closed doors. Shock froze everything. No one rushed forward. No one defended what was right. Eyes dropped. Silence filled the space where accountability should have lived. That silence felt familiar. Years of holidays spent on the edge of rooms, years of being tolerated instead of embraced, favoritism dressed up as tradition, excuses disguised as peacekeeping. What cut deeper than the slap was who stood behind that rage. A husband lingered just a few steps away, face carefully neutral, eyes refusing to meet what was happening. That look carried recognition, not surprise. Later, it became clear that conversations had happened without consent, alliances formed without honesty, money had moved quietly, decisions had been made that benefited one side while sacrificing another. The hospital outburst wasn't spontaneous, it was desperation leaking through a crack. The realization settled heavy. This marriage had been built beside secrets, not truth. Loyalty had been promised but rented out when convenient. The same hands meant to protect had been busy shielding someone else's wrongdoing. That slap was permission for everything hidden to start unraveling. As security finally intervened and the hallway returned to its uneasy calm, something shifted. The humiliation no longer belonged to the one struck. It clung instead to those who thought silence would keep them safe. That was the moment everything stopped being endured and started being remembered. Silence settled in the hospital corridor like a second skin. Not a word was spoken in defense, not a step taken forward. Every shout, every insult, every face that turned away was taken in and stored. What looked like shock to everyone else was survival. Breathing stayed steady while memory sharpened, capturing details that would matter later. The way a nurse flinched, the way a relative pretended to check a phone, the way comfort was chosen over truth. That quiet wasn't empty. It became a ledger. Each cruel word was logged. Each excuse made on behalf of violence was recorded. The ones who whispered afterward about keeping the peace didn't realize peace had already been broken long before that hallway. This was only the moment it stopped being hidden. The hardest memory to absorb belonged to a husband standing just close enough to hear everything. No outrage crossed that face, no shock either. There was calculation instead, the kind that comes from knowing more than should be known. That expression unlocked memories that had once been brushed aside, late-night calls taken in other rooms, financial conversations shut down with irritation, paperwork signed without explanation. Loyalty hadn't shattered in the hospital. It had been cracked slowly, carefully, long before. Silence allowed patterns to line up. The stepbrother's confidence suddenly made sense. So did the way certain family members always seemed protected from consequences. Money had been moving quietly between accounts under the excuse of helping family. Agreements had been made without consent. A marriage had been used as cover, stability offered up as camouflage while deals were made behind closed doors. Every ignored message, every dismissed concern, every moment labeled as overreacting took on a new shape. The slap was only the loudest proof of a much quieter betrayal. This family thrived on silence because silence kept secrets safe. What no one realized was that silence also preserves evidence. Later, when voices finally softened and apologies were suggested instead of offered, the calm felt rehearsed. It was too late for denial. Memory had already done its work. Faces, dates, conversations, all arranged neatly, waiting for the right moment to surface. That day taught a simple truth. Staying quiet let them believe they'd won, and that mistake would cost them everything. The truth didn't explode all at once. It seeped out in fragments, slipping through cracks that had been ignored for years. Doors closed more often after the hospital. Calls were taken outside. Paperwork was suddenly locked away. A marriage that once felt like shelter began to feel like a carefully staged set. Every conversation rehearsed, every reassurance delayed just enough to feel false. Late nights brought answers that daylight never did. Bank statements didn't line up. Transfers were labeled as favors, loans, family obligations. Names appeared that had no place there, including the stepbrothers. The confidence shown in that hospital hallway hadn't come from nowhere. It had been funded, protected, and quietly encouraged. The realization landed heavy. Cruelty had backing. Questions were met with irritation instead of clarity. Voices rose not from guilt, but from fear of being seen too clearly. Excuses piled up, claims of protecting the family, of avoiding drama, of doing what was necessary. What was really being protected were shared interests, deals whispered between brothers who weren't related by blood, but by benefit. A marriage used as a shield, stability as proof that nothing could be wrong. Every argument circled the same point and never touched it. The slap in the hospital had never been about anger. It had been panic. Panic that someone might speak. Panic that eyes were finally open. Panic that the truth wouldn't stay buried where it had been carefully placed for years. The most painful discovery wasn't the money. It was the loyalty, the way a husband chose silence over safety, the way truth was treated as a threat instead of a promise. Trust didn't crack. It collapsed under the weight of knowing that humiliation had been accepted as collateral damage. Messages were found, agreements laid bare, promises made to others that directly contradicted vows spoken out loud. Each secret connected back to that moment in the hospital where violence had been used to reassert control. It was never about respect. It was about keeping the arrangement intact. Once everything aligned, the fear shifted sides. Calm returned not because forgiveness arrived, but because preparation was complete. The lies had done their work, and now they were ready to undo the ones who told them. The marriage didn't end with a scream. It ended with clarity. Nothing happened all at once, and that was the point. There were no raised voices, no dramatic confrontations, no scenes that could be twisted into another excuse. Everything unfolded quietly, guided by timing instead of emotion. Hospital records were requested under the pretense of insurance. Messages were backed up just in case. Legal documents were reviewed with calm curiosity. Each piece slid into place with unsettling precision. The truth formed a pattern that could no longer be denied. The slap in the hallway was tied directly to fear. fear that official reports would contradict private stories, fear that witnesses had names, fear that records don't forget the way people do. Text messages revealed coordination, not coincidence. Conversations about money were disguised as family support, but the numbers told a different story. Transfers matched dates, signatures matched agreements, lies matched benefits. The husband's role became impossible to minimize. There were emails confirming knowledge that should have been confronted, not concealed. Legal advice had been sought, not to fix what was broken, but to protect those responsible. Silence wasn't accidental. It had been chosen. Loyalty had been redirected. A marriage had been used as proof of stability, while deception operated freely behind it. The moment of revelation came in a setting they assumed was safe. Family gathered, confident in their version of events, expecting compliance disguised as forgiveness. Instead, documents were placed on the table. Messages were read aloud. Dates were clarified. Questions were answered before excuses could be formed. The same people who watched violence without objection were forced to confront evidence without escape. Faces changed, confidence drained, alliances fractured in real time. The stepbrother's bravado vanished first, replaced by confusion and denial. The husband followed, scrambling for explanations that collapsed under their own contradictions. No shouting was needed. The truth carried its own weight. What hurt them most wasn't exposure to strangers. It was exposure to each other. Every lie required another person to betray. Every secret demanded shared guilt. Once revealed, there was nowhere left to stand without standing alone. Reputations didn't shatter loudly. They eroded quietly, piece by piece, exactly the way trust had been taken. When the room finally fell silent, it was different from before. This silence wasn't survival. It was consequence. And in that stillness, nothing remained hidden, and no one remained protected. If this story resonated, remember, truth always outlives lies, and silence doesn't mean surrender. If you want more real, emotionally charged stories that expose hidden betrayals, family drama, and secrets that change everything, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. Your support keeps these stories alive and the truth uncovered.